Hi, everybody. Welcome to Searching for Sparks. This is episode 5, and today I'm really excited to have Dino J.A. Deane on, a noted trailblazer in music and trombonist working with electronics early on. He's always been an innovator and a musician that's so forward thinking. He's always ahead of the curve, and an inventor and an innovator. So he's worked with people such as John Hassel, Brian Eno, Butch Morris, Ike and Tina Turner, and on and on. And we met at the Punk Festival in 2009 and ended up working together. So without further ado, bringing on Dino J.A. Deane. Hi, Dino.
Hi, Tim. How you doing?
Dude, you look great. I haven't seen you in a while.
I cleaned up since yesterday, yeah. Looked kind of grisly yesterday, but we cleaned up.
The hermit of Mink Hollow, so to speak. So, dude, welcome, and it's so great to have this time to talk to you about your journey in music, our journey together in music, our meetings, and there's a lot to do in this short period of time that we have. But you've done so much in your life with music, and there's a lot that I don't know about you. And some of the initial questions I have are, first of all, where are you from? Where were you born? And part two of that question is, at what point did music grab you and you knew that this is the way for me?
I was born in Los Angeles, and my father was a musician before the war, before World War II. And he was a drummer and a bass player. And in the 40s had a big band in LA. And after he got out of the service, he stopped music and went into business. But he was the one who introduced me to music.
Wow.
And early on, it was New Orleans music and big band music, and that was kind of my early first introduction to music. And I think early on it just felt like this was the path for me, was music. But yeah, that's where it started, through my father.
It was always around in your house, the music. You always just heard it from day one, I guess.
Yeah, I mean he always liked listening to big band music, Dixieland music, and I'll tell you a story, which is probably the story that I think the first thing that happened for me that really kind of made me, or unveiled the fact that I was going to hear things differently, was there was a period of time when I was in high school, junior high and high school, and it happened for, I don't know, I think 2 or 3 years in a row. We lived in Los Angeles, and once a year for a week at Disneyland, they would have this big band week. And so my father would take me to Disneyland on like a Wednesday night, a school night, and there would be Stan Kenton, Woody Herman, Duke Ellington,
Wow.
Count Basie, and I'll never forget this. The majority of the bands were set up around in Tomorrowland, okay, which was perfect, right? And they were set up in open air kind of a situation. And we had been watching, I think, Woody Herman, and Buddy Rich was playing with him at that time. And we were going over to see Count Basie. And so we're walking, and we hit this certain point, and you could hear Woody Herman, you could hear Count Basie, you could hear Duke Ellington. And I just like stopped. And that's where I wanted to stay and listen. It's like all of a sudden I heard all these bands combined.
Wow.
And my father was like, come on, we're going, and I was like, no, this is the spot here. But I mean, that was the first thing that really kind of, and it was not unlike, what Charles Ives was doing with multiple ensembles, right?
Yeah.
But here was something that happened in real time, and it was a thing that stopped me in my tracks,
Wow.
and it was like, oh, this is what music sounds like.
So that was maybe the first moment that this
I think it was the first moment that pointed out that I was going to go a different path.
yeah, you heard it. It stopped you in your tracks. That's amazing.
Yeah, no, it was really one of those. And my father was like, what are you doing? Come on, we gotta go over here.
How old were you at that time?
I'm trying to think. It was either junior high, which would have been like, what is that, the 8th grade?
Yeah.
Or it was a freshman or a sophomore in high school. So it was somewhere between 13 and 15.
And at that time, were you playing trombone at that time?
Oh yeah. No, I started playing trombone in the 5th grade, I think.
Wow.
And it was at my father's, he thought I should play that instrument. I mean, he was teaching me drum rudiments.
All right.
So I had a little practice pad and his snare drum, and he was teaching me drum rudiments. And we didn't have a piano yet. And then he was the one who thought that I should play the trombone. So in public school, in the 5th grade, I think in the 4th grade, you could start playing string instruments. And in the 5th grade, you could start playing the other instruments.
Wow.
So I was like a product of actual public school music programs.
Wow. That don't exist anymore.
That don't exist anymore. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. And so you followed that path. And what happened after high school? Did you go to music college or anything like that?
No, I really wanted to go. I was in high school, and I think I was 17, so I was probably a junior in high school. And
Right.
there was this one of the guys who was older, who was a drummer and a vibes player, was studying with this teacher, Merv Kennedy. And he said, you got to study with this guy. So I had gotten a job at a music store, moving pianos at a music store,
Wow.
which was pretty ridiculous. That they were letting, 17-year-olds be responsible for moving pianos. And so I got this job so I could pay for harmony lessons with Merv. And he was one of those teachers that just opens the door, And I remember the first lesson. I go in there and he said that, he teaches harmony from the keyboard. And I'm like, I don't play the keyboard. I'm a trombone player. And he says, "Don't worry, I will teach you." And he sat me down at the piano, and then he just leaned over and he said, "Grope." And that was the piano lesson. And it was really amazing because he was basically going, "Figure it out." You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Just
Another
dig
life.
in. Just dig in. And it was just one of those things where it was just like, "Okay, all right." And it wasn't like the way he said it, it was just like, "You can do this," you
Yeah.
know? So basically gave you permission, you know? And he was just he was just so amazing. He opened so many doors of possibility.
Wow. That's great.
And I wanted to go to Cal Arts,
Ah,
and this was before they moved out to the valley. They were still downtown LA. Well, we didn't have the money to do it. My parents didn't have the money to do it, and I had horrible grades. I
oh,
mean, I mean, I was taking every music class I could take in high school, which was multiple different bands and the choir. And I had A pluses in all those classes, and then like C's and D's and everything that supposedly mattered, right?
right.
Only because I just wasn't interested. I wasn't applying myself in those areas, you
Yeah.
know.
Totally in the music.
So the academic trajectory wasn't going to play out for me. So it's been just really, you know, headphones and Gil Evans records. I mean, just listening and digging in, and I mean, so many hours under headphones, just deconstructing sketches of Spain.
Yeah.
You know. And just how does sound to go to how is it that someone like Gil Evans, who is using a really standard, for the most part, a very standard big band instrumentation, how is it that his orchestrations sound completely different than anybody else's orchestrations who use that same color palette? You
Yeah.
know, how does that happen? You know, and it's the way he, combines voices.
Yeah.
It was interesting. Butch did one tour with Gil.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, playing cornet. I think it was a Italy tour or something.
Mm.
And Butch was another just huge fan of Gil.
Yeah.
And Butch and I never met in LA. We both grew up in LA. And we were also big fans of Gerald Wilson, who was another amazing arranger and had a big band in LA.
All right.
And anytime I could see him, I would go. And sitting in right in front of this incredibly powerful band. And after I got to know Butch, we talked a lot about Gerald Wilson and realized that we had been in the same club the same night, but just didn't know each other.
Yeah.
But Butch told me this interesting story that this one tour he did, playing cornet in Gil's band. He said every night there'd be like some little change in the internal parts, like somewhere in bar, 92, his note would be different than it was the previous night, and that he was always, tweaking things. I thought that was very interesting.
That's really cool. Wow, what a huge subject, Gil Evans, and it's like coming up with all these big bands. This has given me a whole different view of who you are and why you are. It's like standing in between three big bands and saying that's it, and Gil Evans being, transcribing Gil Evans and really listening to his palette of sound. Really tells me a lot about where you were headed and what was pulling you into music. And I guess decidedly jazz was what you were listening to and playing at that time.
Yeah, I was really kind of, I went to like a suburban high school, and you know everybody was listening to the Beach Boys, and I was like a total jazz snob. And when I was in high school, it was like Art Blakey,
Wow.
it was like Miles Davis,
Yeah.
but for me it was James Brown. I was like just so into James Brown
Yeah.
because his concept of time,
Yeah.
and when you listen to his music, there's like space in between the beats. There's such a precision in his music that you actually hear like silence in between the beats.
Wow.
And his concept of time and groove is just, so I was like huge. And there was this one girl, I forget her name, but she was totally into James Brown. And it was like someone I could talk to, you know, because everybody else was listening to the Beach Boys and
Ah,
whatever.
right.
And but no, then it was, and then uh, it was the psychedelic thing that kind of pulled me into. It was James Brown that pulled me into the funk thing, which then led to Sly,
Yeah.
and I mean, you wouldn't have Prince without Sly. I mean, it's like he opened so much up.
Yeah.
uh, and then it was the psychedelic thing, and it was actually before Hendrix. I mean, Hendrix just flipped everybody's head, you know, no matter what genre of music you were into. Hendrix flipped your perspective on everything.
Yeah.
But before it was Hendrix, for me, it was the first Vanilla Fudge album.
Ah.
That band was so ahead of its time and really ushered in heavy metal. And when you listen to that first album where they're doing, covers of You Keep Me Hanging On or Bang Bang, you know, but they've slowed everything down. They have these incredible orchestrations, these incredible vocal harmonies, and I mean, that guitar player was amazing, and the drummer and the bass player. I mean, come on. I mean, it was just
Tim
like,
Bogart, I think, right? Tim Bogart and Carmine Appice.
yeah, who then went on to, that band they had with Jeff Beck was
Yeah.
was astounding. You know, but that band, I think, really highly underrated.
Yeah.
I think is really pre-metal, and and that was another one that just flipped me because there was this combination of this noise element,
Yeah.
uh, this kind of free playing element with these really structured, incredible um, instrumental and vocal arrangements on these uh, uh, pop songs, and they turned them into something, you know, completely different. That was another big, huge influence.
Yeah.
And then Joni Mitchell. I
Oh,
mean, you know, I mean that's like, you know, she for you know, for me, she's, you know, you've got, you know, you've got Train, you've got Miles, and Joni. I mean,
wow.
they're, I mean, her concept of structure, of melody, of chords,
Yeah.
her guitar playing. I mean, come on. So that was, so it's, you know, it definitely comes out of jazz, but, you know,
Well,
and then
go ahead.
well, just growing up in that, you know, that period of time of the 60s and 70s,
Yeah.
where there was just this expansion, and not just in jazz, and
Everything.
in across the board in contemporary classical music and everything. There was just this period in folk music and everything. There was just this period of
Yeah.
incredible expansion,
Yeah.
and there was just so much growth in music across the board in that particular era,
Yeah.
that to be coming of age in that era, it was this huge, it's just like, how could you not be influenced by all these different, you know, colliding points of view?
Yeah. It was mind bending, I'm sure. You know, it's like I was in 1960, I don't know, 69, I was 9 years old. So, you know, I was coming off of the tail of you know, my sister's records collection and listening to that. And yeah, I remember, you know, it's like as a little kid, I had no idea what was going on, but it was just like everything that was on was mind bending to me, you know. And that
Yeah.
includes cinema as well. All the films that were coming out in 1967, 68, 69, 70 were benders. And you know, a lot of people I talked to about that era, like late 60s, early 70s, still refer to it as the golden age of creativity and consciousness, maybe, you know.
Well, I mean, you know, I mean, you can't discount the whole um, expansion of, you know, through the use of, you know, psychedelic drugs. There was a, you know, an intentional exploration of an expansion of consciousness, you
Yeah.
know. And when you have that coupled with a creative medium, it's going to be expansive, you know. Which is, so it's, yeah, it's pretty amazing when you when you just look at how much innovation
Yeah.
was happening in that period of time, you know.
So around then, I guess you were starting to play out live or beginning to play in LA and in some bands, funk bands or whatever. And I'm
Yeah,
curious what happened around that time, and at what point did you start delving into electronics? Because I know synthesizers and all that stuff were making their appearance at that time too, for the first time, really.
yeah. Well, I was playing in a funk band, um, 8-piece funk band. You know, guitar, bass, drums, female vocalists, um, three horns, and we played 5 sets a night, 6 nights a week.
Wow.
And I was in that band for 6 years, from the
Wow.
time I was 19 until whatever 6 years after that is.
25.
Um, and we played all around California and up in Alaska and Hawaii. And we had a manager, and we were a cover band, you know, and we played funk, a lot of Sly. At that period of time, the horn bands were really popular. So, you
Yeah.
know, um, and we were a bad fucking funk band. And, and, it's like, if, if the, if the room wasn't sweating, they weren't selling drinks. You know what I mean? And so we made people dance.
Yeah.
And we would go into it. We got a reputation because there was this kind of dance scene happening in LA
Yeah.
in the in that period of time, 69, early 70s. And they would have dance contests, right? And so these dancers who would go to these dance contests would follow the good bands around. And so we would get hired at a club that wasn't doing so well because we would bring the dancers in.
Right. Right.
And it got to the point where we would go into a club. So this is 5 sets a night, 9 to 2, 45 on, 15 off, 6 nights a week. And we would go into a club for a minimum of 2 weeks and often stay at the same club for 2 months.
Wow.
And we rarely had a week off. So we would go into some club in, I remember one of the favorite clubs was this place on 6th and Kenmore in LA called the Garage. And it was an old auto garage that they turned into a club. And there was a cinder block. It was kind of a warehousey thing. And there was a cinder block bathroom, right? And on top, on the ceiling of the bathroom was the stage. So it was really a high stage, because you had this 8-foot cinder block,
Yeah.
double bathroom with these stairs going up, which we had to hump the Hammond B3 and the Leslie,
Oh my.
and our PA system up, and we were in that club. We would be in that club for 2 months, and that club would sweat. I mean, boom. I mean that yeah, yeah. So I
So
was playing it. I was playing in that band, and
yeah.
then I got involved with this horn section. So I was in a horn section in that band. Mike played trumpet, Fuzzy played saxophone, and I played trombone. Fuzzy played flute, I played flute, and then I also sometimes would play uh, either organ or electric piano. And then we all played percussion. And then I got involved with another horn section called the LA Horns. And we were doing studio work during the day.
Yeah.
So, and that's how the thing, we were, since the horn bands were so popular at that period of time, all these rock bands that were recording albums would on one or two songs would have a horn section come in.
Yeah.
And so we were like kind of a B tier, not an A list tier, but a B tier. And we would come in, saxophone player, trumpet, and trombone. The saxophone player would listen to the track, write out 6 horn parts on the spot. We would lay the first trumpet, first trombone, the tenor sax, and then second trumpet, second trombone, baritone sax, right?
Yeah.
And I think it was $100 a tune. So the the sax player was getting 25 for the arrangement and 25 for playing. And then trumpet player was getting 25 and I was getting 25. Okay. So we would go in and in 1 3-hour session do maybe 2 tunes, right? So walk with $50, right? And so we started getting like a little name, because we could just come in and do it, boom, boom, boom. One of the people we worked for was some independent producer, and turns out he was friends with Ike Turner and
Ah,
played him some stuff we had done for him.
there it is.
So the next thing we know, we get this call. Ike's producing something for one of the Ikettes, and we go down and start doing some stuff for Ike. And then that just moved over to he was working on Nutbush City Limits
Wow.
for, and that just moved over to us doing all the horns on Nutbush.
Wow, man.
And that was a whole, so so this was my life at the time. Okay.
Sounds great.
From 9 to 2, I'm playing with the funk band in a club. At 2 o'clock, I would drive over to Torrance to Bollock Sound, which was Ike's studio, and do horn sessions from 3 a.m. to 6 in the morning.
Oh,
Then go drive home, stop for breakfast, go to bed. So probably about 7:38. Get up at 4, drive to the club for rehearsals with the funk band, grab some dinner, start the gig at 9.
wow, man.
Yeah. Of course, I was probably what, 24 at that time.
You were doing everything you wanted to do.
Exactly. Everything you want. It's like this is great.
Wow, that's amazing. I was always wondering what led to the Ike and Tina Turner connection. And was that a total studio, or did you actually play with him live at points?
Not with Ike and Tina. It was interesting. Ike was an amazing engineer.
Oh
I
yeah,
learned I learned a lot about recording from just, I was, the whole time I was doing studio work, anytime I could be in the control room and just kind of melt into the wall and
yeah,
just kind of like watch,
yeah,
I would do that.
yeah.
And I learned a lot about recording from Ike. He was a really good engineer and really had an interesting understanding of all that stuff.
Hmm.
That's when I first got exposed to synthesizers, was in
Ah,
that period of time. He was using synthesizers. He had the first drum machine I ever saw that wasn't, somebody had made this. They just called it Red. And he was, he, I would always try to get to the horn sessions before they started so I could just kind of stick my head in and watch whatever was going on.
yeah.
And he would lay down these drum machine tracks, and then he would bring in a drummer and he would replace them, but part by part. Okay.
Oh,
So
okay.
I remember one night going in and the drummer was in there only playing kick drum
That's awesome.
and replacing the drum machine parts with a real kick drum. And then coming, doing a pass and only playing snare drum. And this was like, 72, 73,
Yeah,
very, you know, early for that stuff. Which
Yeah.
I mean, and you look at the Sly was doing the same thing. You look at like the song like "In Time,"
Yeah. Woo.
which has, which has that drum machine part, and then the way that real drummer plays against it. You know, I mean, there was a lot going on at that period of time. But that's when I first got introduced to synthesizers, and that was it. I was like, I was down that rabbit hole in a heartbeat, you know.
Wow. And so what was happening then? So when you started investigating the synthesizer side, at some point you coupled that with your trombone and started triggering them, right? Is that how it went?
Yeah, that was a whole so the first synthesizer I bought, I I had a friend who had a 8-track recording studio,
Hmm.
and I would trade overdubs. So I would do horn, trombone overdubs, flute overdubs, percussion overdubs, keyboard overdubs on anything he wanted. If I could go into his studio like after hours and do whatever I wanted to do. Right?
That's
So
great.
I was like trading, right? And he had an 8-track studio and he had an ARP 2600.
Wow.
So that's the first synthesizer I actually got to explore.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
the first synthesizer I actually purchased was an Octave Plateau Cat,
Oh yeah.
which was it was like a mini Moog and an ARP Odyssey had a baby. It was the Cat. It was a very interesting, unique synthesizer. And there was this guy in LA. God, what was his name? God, I can't remember his name. And he was a synthesizer tech, and he was like, he would tweak out whatever you had. And there was a 360 Systems at the time, a little company in LA, where we're making pitch to voltage converters. So this is pre-MIDI, okay? And so I had a transducer pickup in the mouthpiece of my trombone that
Yeah.
was going into this pitch to voltage converter. And that was, I had these inputs put into the back of the Cat that would accept these voltages and triggers.
Wow,
And
man.
so I could play the synthesizer with my trombone. And he made a bunch of foot pedals, these foot switches, so it had two pitch-based oscillators. It was paraphonic, so you could play two notes at once. It had two oscillators and a noise generator.
Wow.
So that it would track the pitches. You could either envelope follow your playing or use the envelope in the synthesizer.
Mm.
And the switches, I could turn off the two oscillators and the noise source independently. And then that transducer was controlling the synthesizer. Then I had a Roland 301 chorus echo.
Oh yeah. Space Echo.
Yeah, but it was the second one, the Space Echo, the
The 301.
202.
Yeah, yeah. 201.
This was, the 201. The 301 had this mixer component, so you had inputs, right? So
Yeah.
I had the synthesizer going into it. Then, as well as the transducer, I had a condenser microphone in the bell of the horn that was going through an MXR Distortion Plus that little yellow
Yeah,
nasty ass
I have
distortion.
one.
Yeah, a Neutron phaser, an
Whoa.
ADA flanger, and a Morley volume wall.
Wow, man. Signal
And
chain.
yeah, so that was going in. So I had the synthesizer, which I could had control of the oscillators independently, and I usually had one tuned either to the pitch of the trombone or an octave lower, and then one usually tuned like a fourth or a fifth up, and then the noise source. So you had three color components there,
Yeah.
plus the sound of the pedal board on the trombone sound,
Yeah.
all going into the space echo, which had that chorus circuit in it.
Yeah.
Plus, it had a physical spring reverb tank in it.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and the 301 had sound on sound capability,
Wow.
so you could do migrating loops,
Yeah.
right? And then the output of that went to two polytone mini brutes, and that was my stereo trombone rig, and that was like 76, I
Wow,
think.
man. Yeah, I think a lot of the in 76, 75, a lot of the um, the albums that I was listening to, probably I'm thinking of, maybe Return to Forever or some of the Mahavishnu stuff. And, everybody was delving into the latest synthesizer stuff. And I just remember, like on the back of, say, like Inner Worlds by Mahavishnu, which was, I think, their last record at that time. John McLaughlin had a pitch to voltage guitar, I think, and everybody was starting to get into that. And I'm not sure I recall anybody in the wind department doing what you were doing, although maybe Randy Brecker was doing some of that stuff at the time.
I can't think of anybody at that period of time. I mean, obviously, Miles, had the wah-wah pedal going on, and there were
Yeah,
people were definitely moving into
yeah,
using pedal boards on brass instruments, woodwind instruments.
absolutely.
Um, the I can't think of. No names come to mind of people actually doing pitch to voltage conversion with horns at that period of time. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm sure wasn't the only one, but I can't think of, nobody comes to mind
yeah,
that I can think of.
yeah. And at that time with that rig, were you recording like solo kinds of stuff, or were you incorporating that rig into like a live band concept as well?
I was incorporating it into as many live situations as I could, as many recording situations as I could. Um, and it was when I, you know, it kind of took a back seat when I actually went on the road with Tina after Tina left Ike.
Ah,
She kind of disappeared for a year. All the sessions with Ike stopped. And about a year after that, I was actually up in San Francisco, and I got a call that she was putting a band together and she wanted to use the horn section from the studio.
wow.
And so I went on tour with her for a year, uh, playing trombone, alto flute, clavinet, and string synthesizer.
Nice.
And so we were on tour a lot, and so I wasn't doing anything with the trombone electronics. I
Yeah.
mean, it was all acoustic trombone, and then I had a Krumar orchestrator, which was kind of it was like the Selena, but
Yeah.
I just liked the sound of it better.
All right.
It was kind of a mozzarella Velveeta instead of just a regular Velveeta. There was something. I mean, they were both so cheesy. You know, when you at the time, both of those, the Selena from ARP and the Krumar, which was an Italian company.
Yeah.
They were so groundbreaking at the time. You know,
Yeah.
mid '70s, where you could actually get these quasi string sounds. But in retrospect, God, they sounded awful. They're so cheesy. They're so cheesy.
It was a new sound though at the time, so
At the time, it was astounding. I mean, everybody was just because before you either had a Wurlitzer or a Rhodes, and you either had a Vox or a Hammond, and that those were the only two flavors that keyboard players had. You know.
yeah. Wow. So you did the tour with Tina, and at what point did it's like I see this kind of funk beginning and big band influences, and then at some point we you flow into, I don't know, where did you go? Where did you go from
Well, after after I did the tour with Tina for a year, and that was kind of it. You know, it was kind of like, I want, I want something more. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, it was an incredible experience, and it taught me a lot about
Yeah.
traveling and
Yeah.
what it means to be ready and energy. I mean, her energy. She had to be in her 40s at that period of time. Everybody in the band was in their 20s.
Wow.
We would do these, 2-hour shows, and she would kick our asses every night. I mean, when she hit the stage, boom, it's like, and there was just this focus in her energy that was, I mean, that taught me a lot about, performance energy,
Yeah. Yeah.
and what you really need to bring, you know,
Wow.
whether,
You have a
whether
better
it, whether,
future, Tina.
whether it plays out in a physicality that she had, or whether it plays out solely in a musical focus that doesn't involve a physicality.
Yeah.
There's still this intention of energy
Yeah.
that was, just to experience that every night, you know.
Yeah.
But when I left Tina, I moved up to San Francisco,
Mm.
and there was just I dove way into the free improvisation scene in San Francisco, into the theater scene, doing sound design for dramatic theater, into the dance scene, doing music for dance, um, and that was just such an incredibly fertile place. And in some situations, I could use the electronics. In some situations, it was all acoustic. Um, it was just that melting pot of the late '70s in San Francisco was, I mean, it was astounding.
Yeah.
Uh, but then the thing that really flipped everything was, I mean, I was heavily into the free improvisation scene, the dance scene, the theater scene,
Hmm.
and there was just so much creativity going on in all those areas. But the thing that flipped everything was the punk scene. The first punk scene was there was this it's kind of an example of the first stage of learning. The first stage of learning is naivete,
Yeah,
where you don't know.
that's right.
Okay, but the first punk scene and that whole DIY aesthetic of do it yourself. There were these bands that could not play to fucking save their lives, right?
Yeah,
But they were creating this incredibly compelling music. Now, you could argue the technical aspects of it as music,
yeah,
but there was no denying how viscerally compelling it was.
yeah. It had a power.
It had a power, and it was because it was coming from this place of pure naivete with this kind of fuck you intention behind it. You know what I mean? And it was astounding. I remember the first time I saw DNA,
Oh,
the first time I saw Christian Marclay.
yeah, man.
I mean, it's like these bands were like, what is going on here? And there was a number of musicians I knew who were in the free improvisation uh, kind of community who were kind of experiencing the same thing, that this genre, this supposed free improvisation, has got a lot of rules now. It's like it's supposedly free improvisation, but there's kind of a way it's supposed to be done. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And it was kind of like, okay, this is kind of odd, right? You can't do this and you can't do that. You can't really play melody. You can't really play groove. You know what I mean? And it's supposedly free. So there was this. You were kind of drawn to where this energy was happening, and that's when I got involved with Indoor Life, which was this,
ah,
you know,
okay.
in
Musical
which,
interlude.
which was this, you know, this the drummer, my dear friend Joseph Sabella, came from free music. Um, I was playing the pitch to voltage trombone. The singer was coming from this kind of very theatrical place. The bass player was playing a alembic hollow body electric bass,
Wow.
and the majority of what he did was feedback. And um, we were using a 4-track. No, not at that time. It was a 2-track. We were using a tape recorder, and I would record bass parts from the synthesizer onto the tape.
Live.
We'd have a speaker behind the drummer, and he would play to the bass track that was laid down. Okay, so for one of our songs, which was probably our most famous song, the song
Voodoo.
Voodoo, yeah, I played the bass part on the Cat synthesizer via the keyboard, no click track, onto a cassette for 30 minutes. Okay, that tape is what the drummer played to. And then the bass player played feedback over the top of it. I was triggering the white noise generator in the synthesizer, playing like a scratch rhythm guitar part.
Wow.
And so we were using tape as an orchestrational tool.
Yeah.
And during that period of time, and I think this is one of the reasons that the first punk scene was so short-lived, is when you're in that stage of naivete where you have no command of your instrument and all you have is intention. As soon as you start learning how to play your instrument,
Mm.
you become this really mediocre musician for a very long time. Okay? And so there's this very short window of actual true naivete,
Yeah.
because as soon as you start learning something, you're no longer naive. You're just a really, you're a student, you
The
know.
spell is broken, so to speak.
The spell is broken. Yeah, and I think that's why those bands, that first wave of punk, and you know, I mean, the corporate takeover, the recording industry takeover,
Yeah.
and the promotion of certain bands and blah blah blah, you
Yeah.
know, that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
But when you look at that first period of time and the bands that were really kind of like bringing it,
Yeah.
it got brought for a pretty short
Yeah, I
period
think
of time.
it's a pretty interesting moment in time too, and you know, even in the same thing, same kind of thing was probably happening in New York too. You know, where it was
Oh
like
yeah, it was happening. Oh yeah.
a collision of every style was coming into bands. I mean, you'd have great free jazz saxophone players in a punk band, you know, down
Oh yeah.
at the Knitting Factory or something. You know.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at a band like Perubu, which
Yeah.
was, you know, I mean, you know, it, you know, I mean, if you want to learn, if you want to really hear where Talking Heads came from,
Yeah.
listen to some early Perubu.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, hello. But I mean, what they were doing and how they were using the synthesizer guy who was playing just completely all over the map on top of what they were doing.
Yeah.
I mean, just amazing, bizarre. You know, the thing that was so interesting about that period of time, as long as you wore red or black and your songs were relatively short, that was pretty much it in terms of the description of the genre, you know.
Yeah.
It's like you could do pretty much anything you wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just had to have a lot of attitude behind it, you know,
Yeah.
a lot of
Yeah.
attitude.
That was definitely an exciting time. And how long did Indoor Life stay around as a performing unit?
Probably about 3 years longer than it should have,
And
you
you made a
know.
bunch of records with them as well.
Yeah, we did. We had I think four,
Hmm.
and there's video. You can see video of this crazy ass band.
So stuff up on YouTube or on your
Oh
YouTube page.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Just put in Indoor Life and you'll see stuff. There's one really good one from a concert we did in France that I think really captured the band at the height of what it brought to the table.
Oh, cool. I'll look at that later on for sure.
Yeah, it was a great live band. Really was a great live band.
So Indoor Life happened. You're in San Francisco. Did you ever come to New York to live, or did you
Yeah,
stay?
yeah. I actually with Indoor Life in
Ah,
'81. I moved to New York with Indoor Life, and uh, so I was with Indoor Life. We were playing all the places you needed to play. And we did 2 European tours while we were living in New York. And that's when I started doing stuff with Zorn. That's when oddly enough, I ran into John Hassel. He lived a few blocks from where I lived. And I
Wow.
just ran into him walking his dog. And he had come to a couple of our shows, a couple of the Indoor Life shows. And I told him I wanted to play with him.
Oh,
And he said that he had no interest in having a trombone player in his band. And I told him I didn't want to play trombone in his band. I wanted to play percussion in his band. And that's how that connection happened.
so did that directly lead to that first record that you did with him, Power Spot?
Uh,
Or was that later?
well, I mean, I came on. He had just released Akadabara Java,
Mm.
and I got on his band. I think it was either 82 or 83, and it was from that, basically bumping into him while he's walking his dog and just saying, "I want to play with you."
That's amazing.
And well, that was the thing about living in Manhattan. It's like there's that, you have that proximity factor, where you just run into someone that you would like to play music with. You know what I mean? So that I started touring with him,
Ah,
doing electroacoustic percussion, and through the touring that moved into the first record, which was Power Spot.
yeah,
And then so I did Power Spot, Surgeon of the Night Sky, which was basically a live album,
yeah,
and then Flash of the Spirit, which was the tour we did with Farafina,
yeah.
which was an amazing, that experience was really amazing because we worked with them, we rehearsed with them, and we were staying in this villa outside of Paris for about 2 weeks,
Nice.
living there with Farafina, sharing meals with them, and putting that band together. And then
Wow.
we did 2 European tours, one Japanese tour, and Lincoln Center.
Wow.
And when we were there to do Lincoln Center, that's when we recorded the album, which was kind of pretty much at the end of the first couple tours. So the band was very comfortable with, playing together. But
Wow.
that experience, I mean, all the experiences with, recording Power Spot with Brian and Dan Lanois up at Dan's studio in Ontario. That was an amazing experience.
Oh,
Uh, um, just that working in the studio with them, and I mean, John is one of these players that transcends the instrument. When he's in the zone and everything else is not there, you get to these transcendent places playing
yeah.
music with him. I mean, I have many memories of recording sessions and performances where you're at this other place.
Yeah.
And so being in New York at that period of time, with Indoor Life, so indoor life was happening. We were touring. I was doing stuff with Zorn. I was I'd hooked up with John, and I was touring with John. I was also touring with my partner Colleen. We had this dance music duo.
Yeah.
And then I hooked up with Butch, and I
Wow.
was working with Butch. So
Wow.
that period of time in the 80s,
Amazing.
I was I mean, I would literally be taking my trombone rig with me on a Hassel tour, because at the end of that tour, I was taking a train to meet Butch someplace to play trombone with him.
Wow.
So it was like there were that period of time for me, and this kind of cascading proximity factor that can happen
Yeah.
uh, it was a very touring wise and recording wise, it was a very fertile period.
Wow. Yeah, it was like you were in the middle or ground zero of all of what was happening, really, you know.
At that period of time, I mean, uh, I was I was I was doing live sampling in Butch's conduction ensembles, playing trombone and doing live sampling.
Yeah.
He had this kind of core group of about 6 people: Myra Melford, Brandon Ross, me, uh, Brian Carrot on vibes. And he would take us to these different locations and then fill out the rest of the ensemble with local musicians. I was also working in Butch's touring trio, which at the time was me and Butch and Wayne Horvitz.
Yeah, yeah.
So we were doing a lot of touring as a trio. Then I was touring with John, doing percussion. I was touring with Indoor Life, and I was touring with Colleen.
Wow.
So there was a lot. There was just, and they were all different. They were all different facets, all
No,
definitely kind of on the edge of wherever they were,
yeah.
whatever genre they would fit into. They were on the edge of that, and each one very unique. And it was, it was just one of those, but it's like I was in my 30s. It's like, that's when you conquer the world, at least in your mind. And so it was it was an amazing period of time. Absolutely amazing period of time. I
It's
feel very fortunate to have, and I'll tell you, growing up in LA, it was like, oh man, you got to move to New York if you're a musician. At some point you have to move to New York, right? I don't think I ever would have moved to New York had I not gone with the band Indoor Life.
yeah.
I don't think I would have done it on my own. And it was going there with the relative safety of a group,
Yeah, yeah.
and then just being dropped into this. When we hit, you know, I didn't see anybody else in New York who was playing synthesizer via a trombone, you know. So people looked at us, It was like,
Yeah.
who the fuck is this guy, I mean, I remember we played this one show, and so much of my sound in Indoor Life did not sound anything like a trombone.
Yeah.
And I remember this one show, Olu Dora, the cornet player,
Yeah.
coming up to the front of the stage and just looking at me, and just like trying to put it together, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it was clear I was playing a trombone, but nothing was sounded like a trombone.
Yeah.
And he just was like looking at me like, what the fuck is going on here? So we got seen when we came to town. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. You
And
were on
then
a UFO landing in
exactly,
the city.
exactly. And so then, you add to that proximity factor of, oh, you just ran into Cecil Taylor, who happened to be going out to get coffee. You know what I mean? It's like that proximity factor combined with, you know, being on the edge of something, it resonated in these different little circles, which was you know great. I mean, it was wonderful. I feel so fortunate to have had that experience.
Man.
And
Yeah.
each one of those shaped me. I mean, I learned, you
Yeah.
know, I learned from John, I learned from Zorn, I learned from Butch. I mean, it's like, you know, it's like you learn from every situation you're in.
Those were amazing situations to be in. And I think with Zorn, you played the Cobra record, as I recall.
Yeah, I did. I did 3 of his big pieces. Cobra's the one that he's most known for,
Yeah.
which is interesting because I think it has nothing to do with music. I think it's a exercise in ego.
Yeah.
When you really look at the rules of what it is, and you look at what it brings out of the people who perform it, it's it's got very little to do with creating music together. It's kind of the clash of the egos, you know. But I think maybe track and field, Cobra 3 times. One of them happened to be one that ended up on that Hat Art release.
Yeah.
Uh, I did 3 of his game pieces. I can't remember the name of the third one.
Mm.
But that's where I met Butch, was on one of his game pieces. I was
Oh,
sitting I was sitting right next to Butch. I had this rack of this 24 space rolling rack, right, that had synthesizer, the pitch voltage converter, all my gear. I mean, the thing was 24 space. It was like a small refrigerator that I would have to keep hidden in the doorway when I flagged down a cab, and it had to be a checker. Immediately open the back door, throw my trombone in there so the guy couldn't drive away, and then drag out this huge rolling rack that could not fit in the trunk and could only, by practically prying the door off the hinges, slide into the back of the checker cab. And I mean, the thought of that I was dragging that shit around Manhattan. It's just like, but I was sitting next to Butch and with this insane rack. And I just remember Butch kind of like looking over at me like, what the fuck is this guy doing, right? And then we just became fast friends.
That's awesome.
Kind of just chatting, and
Yeah.
he invited me to come and see conduction number 1 at the kitchen,
Hmm.
current trends in racism. And I remember watching the conduction, and I was thinking, man, this guy's doing the same thing that I do with samplers, only he's doing it with real people. He's basically, and this makes it sound less respectful than it is, but he's basically using the musicians as samples in a way, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not, it's way deeper than that. And,
Yeah.
but that's how it hit me, was like,
Yeah.
okay, you know, this is some deep stuff here.
Yeah.
And, uh, and then we were playing, the late guitarist, Bill Horvitz, Wayne's brother.
Oh yeah.
Uh, he and about the same time that I went and saw Conduction Number One, Bill, who was one of the first musicians I met when I went to New York,
Wow.
I was playing in duo with him and in a trio with him with Shelley Hirsch, the vocalist. And then Bill said, I want to do this trio with you, me, and Butch. And I had just met Butch, and it was like, okay, cool. And so we started playing together in a trio. And then Butch asked me if I wanted to be part of his conduction band. So I started doing that. So all that, you know, it's that, you know, that proximity thing that happens in that. I mean, I don't know how it happens now because it's so different there.
It's very different. Yeah.
But at that period of time, you know, in the early '80s,
It was very ripe at that time there, right?
it was like kind of I felt like being in San Francisco in the mid '70s. It was like right place, right time.
Absolutely.
I felt the same about being in Manhattan in the early '80s. There
Yeah.
was just like there was, you know, and why something happens at a place at a particular point in time, you know, who knows? But two instances of it feeling like, wow, this was the right place to be in terms of how the path moved forward.
Yeah. Yeah. I was I didn't move to Philly until 86, but I had been in before that. I had been in the university in Ohio, you know, so I had to escape from Ohio and come out this way. And my original thought was getting to New York, but it was via Philly. But then I never left Philly. But I was driving up to New York all the time because I had read so much about what was happening in New York at the time, and I was listening to all that music that was coming out. And you know, by 86, New York, you know, it was through that period, but there was still amazing stuff going on even then.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So that continued a while. And the Knitting Factory was one of the places I remember that, you know, just any night of the week, there'd be three amazing bands kept playing in there. There was always some
Yeah.
in some
Yeah,
way.
no, I remember we used to play at the original when it was just that tiny little storefront.
Yeah.
Uh, there was so much going on there.
Yeah. And what happened after? I mean, you were with John Hassel for a while, and you made a number of records, and then much later on, I think I'm trying to think of the name of the album. The Last Night the Moon Came. That record. That was maybe what 10 years later, or longer.
It was longer. I mean, I stopped playing with John in '88,
Okay.
and yeah, I think it was '88, and I had moved to New Mexico. He had moved to LA, and I really didn't have any contact with him uh, during that period of time. And it was really out of the blue. I think in 2009, maybe.
Wow.
I get this phone call,
So it was like 11
and
years later.
yeah, it was quite a while later, and I really had
Ooh.
no contact with him. And I got this phone call out of the blue from John, but he was with a promoter in Italy that Butch was using at the time. So he knew me, this promoter knew me through working with Butch in Italy, and he was doing something with John, and so they were calling me on his phone from Italy, but it was John, and he said, I'm just finishing up this album, would you like to do some tours? And it was kind of like, wow, okay, this is like, this has been a minute. And so I did a few tours with John around that time. I think I did, the first one was a trio with John and me and Peter Freeman.
Oh.
And then there was 2 tours that were quintets. 2 or 3 short ones. And then that kind of ran its course.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think that you were right before I met you in Philadelphia at the World Cafe. Did you play that gig with Jan Bang? Was in the band?
Yes, and that's when I met you. That's
Did we meet
when
that
I met
night?
you. Yes, I met you that night.
Okay.
You were with the
I was
woman. You were with Ursula. Yes.
Yeah.
And I met you that night at that show in Philly, and then we met again in
Punked.
at the Punk Festival, and
That's
I
when
was
we
doing the remix.
Yeah.
And you guys were playing.
Yeah.
And I was like looking for sounds to grab, and I heard your sick guitar, and I was like, oh, okay, I want this stuff. And then afterwards, when I met you again, it was like, oh yeah, you're the guitar player. I like that stuff. That was funny too. That was funny too, because I don't think either one of us remembered the meeting in Philadelphia.
I still don't remember that. I remember that Ursula had met John in Rotterdam at a festival where they were pairing artists randomly, and she got paired with John, and they became immediate friends. And John loved Ursula, and she wrote a poem for a piece they did and performed it. And so, she went up to see John after that gig, and, they were really happy to see each other. And John was like, I think John at that moment just said, hey, Jan, you need to get Ursula to the Punk Festival. That's it happened.
And that's how that happened. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we got a call.
That's how we connected.
And then when we did that, I remember you, the way the Punk Festival would go is the artist would do a show up in the main theater, but downstairs where you were in another venue, you were sampling. Everybody that was down there, like a small unit, was sampling bits and pieces of the live show. And then what would happen is the audience after our show would go down there, and it would be played back, so to speak, resampled, recontextualized, mutated with some live musicians and samples. And it was always mind-blowing. And I remember you coming up to me, was like, what's that buzz tone you're using?
Yeah. Because I had no idea who was playing.
Yeah.
Right. And they just said, this is the source material, and you've got the length of the show to get your stuff and put it into some kind of place. And I just remember like scanning the channels, and it's like, obviously I'm going to grab some vocals because, that's the focal point.
Yeah.
But then I'm looking at the other stuff, and all of a sudden there's this like really sick guitar, and I'm like, oh, this is good. Let's get this, you know. And I remember that was, I think, what the first question was like, what's that fuzz tone? and it was what's that guy's name?
Zvex.
Yeah, the Zvex. Yeah.
Factory Zvex. It was the Fuzz Factory, I think it's
Fuzz
called.
Factory, right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great pedal. It's still a great pedal.
Yeah.
That's how we met. And then I think the next year I came back because that the punk festival, first of all, for people that don't know what that's about, and you were doing them for a while, I would imagine, right?
I think I did 3 in a row.
Yeah.
Because and two of them, they brought me in to do conduction with the students.
All right.
And which was a great experience. That was really cool.
I went to one of those.
Yes, you went to the second one.
That was amazing.
And that's when we decided to do something together.
Yeah.
But I remember, yeah, you came to the second one, and yeah, that had the most insane band with the 11 opera singers and the 7 electric guitar players.
It was insane. It was so great. It was so great. It blew me out completely. That was kind of like my first foray into seeing that.
Yeah, I mean, they did really well. They did really well.
Yeah.
I mean, they got a standing ovation. It was great. It was great.
Yeah, so that period of time was great. I just remember the first time I was at Punked with Ursula. I mean, it's kind of a dream festival from my point of view, and some of probably both of our most favorite Norwegian musicians are there playing. And it's their festival, and their point of view and their musicality and their language. And, you know, also I grew up with the ECM catalog, you know, and I was always, as a kid, I was like, where's Norway? And who is Terje Riptel or Terje Riptel? You know, and hearing this.
Is the whole country drenched in reverb? I mean, it's like...
But, you know, the funny thing was my first visit there, I was like, oh, I understand why the music sounds this way, I think. You know, just seeing the landscape and the skies and the water and just the vibe there, at least the times that I was there, which was about 3 times. I was just like, wow, I just love this, you know, and you can understand it. And when you see the fjords and, you know, all of that, it's just like, wow, this is like an alien landscape.
Yeah, it really is.
It's really beautiful.
Yeah, it really is quite beautiful. And it's a very unique festival.
Yeah.
The whole concept of doing these remixes. It's a very unique experience all the way around.
Yeah, everything was on the cutting edge, and it's just, you know, I couldn't wait to come back after that first year. I remember there was I forget what that room's called or that place was called, but it was like the VIP hang. It's where you would the artists would eat their. But then you would go there after the gigs for a party.
Right. 431 or something, or.
Yeah, it was numbers. And the second time I was there, I think it was the second time I was there. I'm trying to think of the trumpet player's name. I can't say his name. But anyway, he's in Super Silent.
Right. Yeah.
I can almost say it, but anyway, he was like, Tim, you have to come with us back to the. I said, well, I'm just a guest this year. He goes, oh no, you're my guest. Come back, you know. So we go in, and we walk in, and there was a Norwegian Belgian brewer there that night who was serving up bottles that just said number 1, number 2, and I was sitting next to Evan Parker. and we were drinking these Belgian beers and chatting, and there were Italian journalists there, and John Paul Jones from Led Zeppelin was sitting at the table right there, and you just kind of cruise through the room and looking at just all these amazing artists, and just such a fun time. No ego, no security. Everybody was cool, the way it's supposed to be, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
And so I had to go back that year. David Sylvian was there that year, and you know, the punk festival. Wow, it's
Yeah, no, it's a very unique experience. Very unique experience.
So I loved that time we talked about doing something, and that eventually turned into Instant Takemitsu, and that was I think that was, I don't know when that was actually. Was it 2010? I knew it was March, the following.
Yeah, yeah, I think it was 2010. Yeah, I think it was. Maybe 2011.
It could have been. I have to do my research, but it's all kind of a blur. But we ended up doing a couple records. One was a live album. Well, I guess they were both live albums. With the first one had some studio stuff, but was mostly recorded on the first tour that we did.
I think it was all.
Was it all live?
I think the majority of the Small Magic
Yeah,
was actually sound checks from the first tour.
that's right.
Because there was just, you know, it's like that group, there was this, you know, there was this chemistry that kind of happened immediately.
Yeah,
And whatever that world was that we went to kind of defined itself pretty clearly, pretty quickly.
yeah.
And I think Small Magic was mostly, there might have been some, I don't think anything was from the studio.
I think that's right, because it was from the radio station at Princeton. There's a track or two.
Yeah, there was a track or two from that, and then there was a lot of things that were actually the sound checks, pieces of sound checks.
The High Zero Festival, maybe. And I know we played the Rotunda, I believe.
We played the Rotunda, and
I know
then we did the second one was the that loft place.
Oh yeah,
With
that was a beautiful concert.
With the incredible projection screens and the reflecting pool, and there was some gorgeous stuff there. And then there was the first just 1K broadcast.
Oh yeah, 1K session.
Down in the basement.
Yeah.
With
projections.
The boom cam and the projections and the GoPros. Yeah. And then there was the last one was the Shapeshifters.
Ah, yeah.
Where we went up to do was it the font conduction? Did we do Shapeshifters on that one, or was it the Stone? I know we did a conduction at the Stone.
We did the Stone because you came in and did Anthony Tidd's jazz camp at the Kimmel, which was amazing.
And then we went up and did the Stone.
Yeah.
And did a conduction at the Stone. Butch asked me to do a conduction there.
That was
did. Anthony came up on that one, and you were on that one.
Yeah.
And did we do Shapeshifters then?
Yeah, most likely. Yeah, it was probably at that time.
Yeah.
And I know we did the Roulette as well, but I think that was real early, right?
Yeah, that was the first gig actually. That was the first gig.
And I remember Butch came to that show. That was the one and only time I got to meet him.
Yeah, he came to that show. That's right. That's right. Yeah, I remember that.
Really super cool. So Yeah, and then the font was 2013.
Yes, that was 2013. That's right. Yeah, because after Butch passed. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And that
yeah.
was amazing.
Yeah, that's a
It
good one. That's
it
a good
was
one.
amazing to hear that, and that's up on your YouTube channel.
Yes, yes, it is. Um, Audio log is the channel.
There's so much to talk about, and it's been so great to just hear the timeline of your musical life, because I never knew how all the connections happened, and that's always so interesting. Like, how did you connect to all these people? As you look back, it's just like this amazing pathway, but in one way, it's really just a beautiful flow of your life opening up into other things, right?
I think as much as we may want to try to control things, I think when you look back at anybody's life, it's like you make a choice at a moment, and that leads to the next part of the journey, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like you can think you're in control of the plan, but eh.
Yeah. Well, this might be a nice segue to bring us to the current moment, which we're all in, and we can talk about that or not. But the segue I was thinking of was the fact that you have this new book that's coming out, and it's called Becoming Music, and
Yes.
you have a copy there. Oh, thank you. Conducting improvisation
As
as
forms of
forms of
qigong.
calm. Yes. Uh, I read this book just recently, and so did my girlfriend Karen. And man, this book, it crosses over to everything. You can read it as being a musician, or you can just read it as being a human being, and pull just beautiful concepts out of it that are going to improve your life. I mean, it just will. And I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, it's the qigong component. Um, Qigong is the root form from the Taoist perspective. It's the root form of all the martial arts. Um, it's the root form of the hard martial combative arts. It's the root form of the healing, softer arts like Tai Chi. It's the root form of the, I mean, they have physicians who do medical qigong, which is an energy-based healing. And so it's about energy. And I started studying qigong 86 when I moved from New York back to San Francisco. And what I what I discovered through studying qigong was something that I already knew but didn't have a name for it. In When you get into the higher forms of improvisation,
Yeah.
where you're not, you know, most people know improvisation as the ability to solo
Yeah.
in some form of style, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at, it could be in a jazz style, which could be broken down by decades.
Yeah.
So if you're doing improvisation in the style of bebop, you wouldn't play the same note choices that you would if you were doing soloing over a New Orleans jazz ensemble. Okay,
Right.
so you can look at it stylistically. And I think jazz is one of the best examples of that, especially when you look at a guitar player, a piano player, or a tenor player. Is if you're playing the style of jazz that was embodied by uh, pre-electric Miles, like My Funny Valentine period,
Yeah.
there is an abstractness to playing a standard. Drop that back 10 years and you wouldn't be allowed to make those choices.
Yeah.
Okay. You look at a form like bluegrass, where there's an incredible amount of improvisation, but it deals with very specific note choices, very specific scale choices. And that's how most people know improvisation. It's the ability to stylistically solo
Yeah.
over a rhythm section. And the rhythm section's whole point of his existence is to support the soloist, you know?
Yes.
When you start looking at, and I don't want to say higher in terms of this is
Yeah.
better, but
Right.
when you start looking at another strata of improvisation where it isn't about soloing, it's about creating an ensemble music
Yeah.
together. That requires being in the moment. And you cannot be in the thinking mind and be in the moment at the same time. Because the thinking mind is analytical and it's looking at something that just happened. And so if you're looking at something that just happened, that's gone.
Yeah.
And while you're looking at that, the moment that you're actually in right now, you're not actually in because you're looking at what happened the moment before.
Yeah.
It's at the same time this incredibly simple concept and this incredibly what the fuck concept, you know? Because when you're learning to play music stylistically, it's all about, okay, I can play this scale, I can play that scale, I can do this against this chord, I can do that against this chord. There is an analytical component. And you know, there are musicians that can play amazing things stylistically. And you actually are listening to them thinking. I mean, you're hearing their thought process.
Yes.
And that's a kind of music.
Yeah.
And it's a very widely accepted kind of music.
Yeah.
There are other ways of improvising that require you to disengage the thinking mind. And that is something that you cannot teach. That you can't, you know, it isn't an IKEA, you know, let's build a bookcase, you know, do A, B, and C, and you get outcome D. You can't teach that. It's an experiential thing. And until you experience it, until you experience being in the moment, bypassing the thinking mind, it's a concept, you know.
Yeah.
You can say, okay, I get that. Yeah, sure, I get that. But until you experience it, no, you don't get it. You may
Yeah.
understand it conceptually as something that can indeed happen, but until it happens to you, it you don't know what it is. You don't have a clue. what I realized studying Qigong is that place of being in the moment, that place of flow, where you basically get out of the way and give up the illusion of control, that you can go on this ride that will present things to you that you could never get to through the mechanism of the thinking mind.
That's absolutely right. Yeah.
And so that's basically what, I think is we've made clear through this kind of history lesson. I didn't go to music school.
Yes,
My
you did.
well, yeah. I mean, I went to I have I don't have a PhD. I have uh, an RLIE, real life experience,
Yes.
and that in the academic world that means dick. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean anything. It's like
It should.
I didn't jump through the academic hoops, but this kind of winding journey that I took,
Yeah.
I learned a lot about music. I learned a lot about sound.
Yeah.
And I'm at a point in my life now where I want to share that information, you know? I mean, just like when Merv told me to grope on the piano and gave me permission to learn on my own.
Yeah.
It's like if I would have had access to this information in one place when I was 19, I would
Yeah.
have been all over it. You know what I mean? So I'm just this book came about from finding myself in lockdown in a field, and it seemed like it was the appropriate time to share this information.
Absolutely.
So, so the book comes totally from a place of service,
Yeah.
uh, and it's not about me and my journey. It's about um, here's another way to look at improvisation. Here's another way to uh, approach music that you're you'll be lucky if you find someone in the academic arena who will show you this door.
Yeah.
You'll be very lucky.
Yeah.
And if you find that person, listen to them.
Yeah.
But it's not a point of view that is, I mean, it's right in the title. The academic world is up here. The hoops you have to jump through to get a PhD are all up here. I mean, it is the analytical mind that world resides in.
Yeah.
So information like this isn't part of that world, which is fine. But it's like there is more.
There's a lot more. Yeah.
And I think one of the what I realized as I started getting deeper into qigong is, oh, that's what I'm doing when I'm in the company of musicians who are improvising not as soloists, but are improvising as ensemble players. And no one is trying to take control of where the music goes.
Yeah.
It's almost like the music is being presented to us in real time, and we're all interpreting it. And so no one is really the composer. We're interpreting, and we're using all the technique and wisdom and knowledge that we have accrued as musicians. And it's coming through our particular filters of what music means to us, like deciding that standing equal distance from four ensembles is the way music should sound. you know it's like we're interpreting the music, and the goal is to create an ensemble sound.
Yes.
Okay, you can't do that from here. It just doesn't work. You cannot be in the moment and be here at the same time. It's impossible.
Yeah.
So one of the things I discovered about conduction, the first time, I had been working with Butch for about 12 years as a musician. When I moved to New Mexico, I decided I wanted to try conducting because I thought I would get a deeper understanding of the lexicon.
Yeah.
If I conducted. Well, the first time I conducted, it was so clear. It was like, this is qigong. It's like I am presenting a sign. The ensemble is interpreting that sign and responding with a sound. The sound is telling me what to do next. So it's like a feedback loop.
Yeah.
And the music creates itself if everybody just stays out of the way and is in the moment.
Yeah.
And I've never seen a form of music, a way of doing music that gets you into that place of being in the moment without you even realizing you're in the moment. And I think that's the most profound thing about conduction. And there's a lot of gesture-based systems out there, and they all produce very different results.
Yeah.
The thing that I think is so profound about conduction and Butch's approach to this is it puts the musician in the moment so quickly and stealth-like that they're responding from the moment before they even realize that they're not thinking. And I've been fortunate to play in a lot of improvising situations where that's the intent of the musicians playing, is to create an ensemble sound. It's not about soloing. And so I've been able to get to that place through association with playing with people who wanted to go there. I've never seen a situation that so just gracefully puts 12 people in a room in the moment, doing things that when you listen back, it's like, how did that even happen?
Exactly.
How did that even happen? How did we get to that? Go ahead.
I was going to just say, I remember playing the Stone, for instance, and just seeing who was on the stage. And, we just got all our gear and set up, and like, whoa, there's some major players up here. Holy shit. And you're just thinking internally about that. Next thing you know, you're playing, we're all playing together ensemble, and the music is coming out. And it was just astounding to me. You don't know really what happened until you hear it back. But just being a part of that, you knew something happened. And, and that could be the same playing in a power trio, like just full rock and roll.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And or in the band that I'm with Kurt Rosenwinkel, that's what we do. We go out and improvise every night, and we never know what happened. The audience is standing up and applauding, and we're like, "What happened?" And we go back to the hotel and listen, and we're like, "Wow, how did that happen?" So it's that principle, you know.
You know, it's interesting. When I was writing the book, it's like, how do you describe that? You know,
Yeah,
what it's like. And I started asking a bunch of improvisers that I've worked with before, tell me what it is to be in the moment. You know, what is
yeah,
it? Tell me what it is, you know. That was the number one response was, I always know it was a good session because I can't remember anything about it.
yeah,
And it makes sense when you think of the analytical mind. When that's engaged, it is recording each thing that happens. Okay.
yeah,
When you bypass the analytical mind, that recording is still going on, but it's in the background.
yeah,
And so you don't have this immediate recollection. Oh, well, in bar 32, he screwed up the changes. He should have played a D flat, because you're not in that analytical place. You know what I
yeah,
mean? And so it makes total sense that the number one comment would be, I don't even know what happened. You know,
yeah,
another one that is I've experienced and other people have shared with me is that out of body experience where you see yourself on the stage
yeah.
playing.
Mm.
You clearly are not making any decisions. Now, there's a big difference between a decision and a choice, just like there's a big difference between a reaction and a response.
Mm.
A decision, a reaction is up here. A choice, a response is from the heart. It's from the being in the moment. You are making choices. You are making responses.
Yeah,
You're not reacting and you're not making decisions. And I've experienced this, and other people have shared that they've experienced this too, is you have this kind of out of body sensation where you're watching yourself playing and
yeah,
you're realizing that from moment to moment, everything you're doing seems to be the appropriate thing to do, but you're not making any decisions about it. You know what I
yeah,
mean? But you're kind of watching it happen.
yeah.
And
Yes.
then the other one that I like that seems to be a much more frequent occurrence with when you're working with electronics than with acoustic instruments
Mm.
is you're deep in the improvisation and it becomes so clear to you that you need to change this sound. And so you start changing the sound and you realize that the sound you're changing, you're not making that sound. And you're trying to change a sound that you're not making. And it's like, because you're just hearing this thing and it's like, okay, I'm going to shape that now. And you realize that you just shaped something different than what you thought, you were shaping. That's another interesting one
Wow.
where who is actually responsible for the sounds. And it seems to happen more in electronics where the sonic definition, the sonic touchstone of an instrument isn't there to begin with. You know what I mean? I mean, it's pretty clear when you're playing a bassoon. It's pretty identifiable who's making that sound, right?
Yeah,
When
yeah,
when when you've got a string of pedals and are yodeling through a string of pedals, who knows? Where did that actually come from?
yeah.
But so anyway, the book is about, it touches on Taoist principles. It touches on Qigong. It touches on the kind of improvisation that I refer to as collaborative composition, where it's an ensemble-based approach,
Yes.
where you're really trying to make an ensemble music in the moment,
Yes.
and no one is trying to control it or trying to take it somewhere.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
just you're just responding to the form as the form reveals itself.
You let it happen.
You let it happen, and then you use, that's the other thing is, I think there's this real misconception about improvisation. I mean, when it's referred to as improv, when it's referred to as jamming, it's like there's this really, I think there's a real lack of respect for what is actually happening that is coming from a not really knowing what is happening.
Yeah.
That it doesn't mean you play anything you want.
Yeah.
That is not what improvisation is. That's not what free improvisation is. Oh, I can play whatever the fuck I want.
Yeah.
No, that's a completely ego-driven point of view.
Yeah.
It's about listening,
Yeah.
bringing everything you have to the table, your
Yeah.
technical ability, your musicality, your point of view, where you're coming from to the table, opening your ears and responding to what you hear around you.
Right.
That's what collaborative composition is.
Yes.
And that's very different from, oh, I can play with whatever the fuck I want.
Yeah.
No, that's not. And there is such a misconception about collaborative composition, spontaneous composition,
Yeah.
and the word I don't even like to use anymore, free improvisation,
Yeah.
because it gets aligned with this egocentric way of looking at things, which
Yes.
is, and it's the complete opposite of that.
Yeah.
You cannot be in the ego when you are playing in a collaborative composition group. That will destroy it quicker than anything.
Yes.
As soon as ego enters the room, that completely will destroy it. So the book is basically, it touches on improvisation from that point of view. It touches on conduction, which comes from, I worked with Butch for 28 years,
Wow.
playing trombone in his ensembles, doing live sampling in his ensembles, editing his recordings,
Yeah.
and he was one of my dearest friends on the planet. And then I have conducted between 1997 and 2020.
Wow.
I did at least one conduction a month for 22 years. And I had 3 long-term ensembles. Out of Context was together for 15 years.
Yeah.
The guitar choir was together for a year.
I love that.
The Flux crew was together for 3 years. And so I've been working with the same musicians over long periods of time doing this way of working. And it's Qigong. It's a form of Qigong
Yeah.
on both ends of the
Yeah.
baton. Collaborative composition is a form of Qigong. That place of improvisation where it's not about ego, it's not about ownership, it's about trust, And, you know, as soon as you tell somebody not to think, as soon as you tell somebody to back away from ownership, all you have is trust. Because when there's no ego, there's but wait a minute, but what am I? You know, when there's no ownership, it's like, but wait a minute, you know what I mean? But you can't get to these areas through ego or ownership.
Yeah.
You just can't get there.
Yeah.
And you have to go to this place of trust.
Yeah.
Going with the flow means you're giving up control, and control. Let's face it, it's an illusion.
Yeah.
You know, everything you think you fucking control in your life, at some point is going to say, "I don't think so."
No, I love when the universe shows up in real life too, and just helps you out.
Yeah, it just says, "No, no, we're not doing that today." I
Dino,
don't care what you, I don't care what you have in your Google Calendar.
yeah. But man, one thing that I said to Carrie yesterday was like when you get online with Dino and we love each other, and just to be able to share time is just so great. And just like that, 2 hours have gone by, and I feel like there's so much more to go. But I think we need to take a break maybe for the moment and do a part
Yeah,
two. And
yeah,
and
anytime.
and and I want to urge everybody that's viewing this to pick up your book, and that comes out in 2 days, right?
Yeah, so what I'm doing, so I wrote this book. It's a tiny book. It's $10. Uh, Let me get that. See, it's a
It's
tiny
great.
book. It's only 60 pages, but there's a lot of information. And if you're looking for something, if you feel like there's something more, check it out.
Oh yeah.
And I'm selling it through Bandcamp.
Yep.
Okay, so on the 20th, the banner that is under the screen right now, Dino J.A, Deane.bandcamp.com, on the 20th, 2 days from now, that is going to be up. And in the music section, there's going to be 2 volumes of music that are solo improvisations that I created during the period of time I was writing the book. So there's going to be music you can listen to and download and buy if you want. If you don't, just listen to it, And then there's a merch button. And if you hit the merch button, it'll go to the book. It's $10, PayPal. I'm in a really remote situation, and there isn't even FedEx where I live. Okay. So it's US Postal Service. Okay. So a copy of the book is $10. It's $3.50 for media mail. Okay. With the, buy the envelope and do the media mail.
Yeah.
Just a heads up, media mail
These
is
days.
they put it on a mule, and they walk that mule to New Jersey. Okay. Media mail, when you get the receipt and the tracking number, it tells you like you just sent it priority mail. Oh, this will get there in 3 days. I have sent out a bunch of advanced copies to people. And so just so you have a heads up, the average time, the way the post office is working right now, is 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's something like that. 2 to 3,
Yeah. Yeah.
depending where
So
it's
you
coming.
just got to be patient. So it's like, I think it's $13.50, the book and the shipping, and it's just me doing this. So it's like,
Well worth it. It's an amazing book, and It's
Yeah,
also
it's come.
kind of book that I could keep around and just open from time to time and refer to it and put these concepts and thoughts in my mind for the day. You know, it's one of those kinds of books. It's just kind of it's always around. It's nice.
Yeah, it was written from that point of view. One of my favorite books is the Tao Te Ching, and it's one of those books where you can just open to a page, read one paragraph, and hang with that for the day.
Yeah,
It's not like a linear. I
yeah,
got to get through the chapters. It's not a. There's a section on electronics,
yeah.
and it's not an ABC equals D kind of book. It's like, here are some concepts, here's a path you can take, and it's not about you trying to follow my path. It's about, here's a path and you're going to discover your own journey. And
Exactly.
you know I just it's coming from a place of service, and I hope the information serves another generation of sonic renegades,
That sounds great, man. Dude, it was so wonderful to hang and listen to all of your insight and seeing the timeline of your amazing musical life, and just to be here and be your friend is a beautiful thing. So I really appreciate your time and being here today and
Well, I
sharing.
feel the same way, Tim. I feel the same way. It's like, from the first time we played together, it's like, and I miss that. I miss that, being at your place in Philly and playing music and eating good food, and so that'll happen in the future, hopefully.
It will. It will. The universe, we'll just let it flow and we'll get there, you know.
That's all you can do. That's all you
Yeah.
can do.
It was a joy, man. Thanks so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you, man. Bye.
I'll see y'all later. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Bye bye.